Welcome back, everybody, to the live webinar here at BINA. Purim number 4, to work or God will provide. The question I want to address today is, do we need to work in order to provide for our families, for ourselves, or does God provide this for us? Is it a lack of faith to work, or is it being negligent and irresponsible just to rely on God? The answer to this question lies within the story of Purim. Purim is this coming Sunday, so that's why we are discussing insights into the story of Purim. The Talmud tells us that the students of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, the great sage Rashbi, asked him, why did the Jews at that time deserve to die? Nothing just happens by chance. If Haman, the wicked Haman, got up and made a decree to annihilate the entire Jewish nation, why did the Jews deserve that at that time? Being a good teacher, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai turns to his students and says, you answer the question, you try to see if you can work out the answer on your own. So the students answered, because they enjoyed, they derived benefit from the su'udah, from the meal, from the feast of that wicked man. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai turns to them and says, it's a great answer for the people who lived in Shushan, for the Jews who lived in the capital city of Shushan Habira, who attended the feast. How about the vast amount of Jews, the vast number of Jews who lived all over the world at the time, who was spread amongst the other 126 provinces that Ahasuerus ruled over? Why did they deserve to die? And the students then turned to their teacher and said, you answered the question. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai answered, because they bowed down to idols. Now, from this back and forth in the Gemara, we see that actually the answer of the students wasn't such a bad answer. It was a good answer. In other words, the Gemara seems to imply that the fact that they partook in the Su'udah, in the feast of Ahasuerus, that was a reason, that was a good enough reason to deserve total and absolute annihilation. The only reason why that's not such a good answer is because it doesn't answer about the other Jews who lived in the other places. But the Jews who lived within Shushan, that does answer. And the obvious question is, what is so bad to attend the feast of Ahasuerus? Even if you want to say that it was non-kosher food and non-kosher wine, but the punishment for that is not death. Especially since we know that the Talmud tells us that the Megillah says that the feast was kirtzoin ish va'ish, which means it was according to the desire of every man, and the Talmud learns out from that actually the feast was kosher. In fact, Mordechai was the mashgiach. Mordechai was the one who made sure that the food was kosher and that the wine was kosher. So what was the big deal? What was the big sin to go to the feast of Ahasuerus that they should deserve total and absolute annihilation? The answer goes to the depth of Jewish survival, of what is the secret to Jewish survival. The Jewish people are called a kifsa achas ben shivim ze'evim, which means one lamb amongst 70 wolves. Our natural state, naturally, the Jews should never have survived through everything that we've been through. We are like a single lamb amongst 70 wolves, where if nature runs its course, the lamb will be devoured and eaten by the wolves around it. The only reason why we have survived, the only reason why this single lamb has survived throughout so many years of persecution is because Gadol Haroya, because the shepherd is great. The shepherd, being God, protects us with supernatural strength that we are able to survive through this bitter exile, through persecution and threats of annihilation. However, we have free choice. We can choose to either be guarded by God, be under this supernatural survival, the supernatural mode of survival, or we can choose to be like everybody else and survive according to nature. If we put ourselves under nature's rule, we will not survive. Because naturally, the Jewish people will never survive because we are like a single lamb among 70 wolves. The only way we will survive is if we put ourselves under the supernatural mode. If we put ourselves under God's rule, then we have a chance of survival. Now, together with this, of course, being that we live in this physical world, we are commanded to do things naturally. So, we are commanded to follow the laws of the land. If we need to use political influence to survive, we need to use that political influence. We need to do things through natural means. However, we need to know that our main protection, where we're really getting our salvation from, is not from these natural means, rather it's from God. The only reason why we need to go through nature is because God commanded us to. That is the system that God, so to speak, set up. But really, who are we being protected by? We're being protected by God Himself. If we stop to believe that, and we put ourselves under the protection of nature, we will not survive. During the story of Purim, the Jews were very well connected to the government. Even from the very beginning, the sages were the advisors of the king. Mordechai was an advisor to the king. Of course, later on, Esther, a Jewess, became the queen. We couldn't have been better well connected. The mistake that the Jews did was that they put their reliance, they put their protection, they thought that they're totally protected because they were so well connected. When Achashverosh invited the Jews to the feast, of course they had to go. Because we have to do things naturally. And naturally, if the king invites you to a feast, you go, otherwise the king will be upset and who knows what will happen. The wording that the Talmud uses is not that they went to the feast. That wasn't the problem. The problem was, nehenu misudasei shel oisei rasha. They enjoyed it. They placed too much importance in this. They put too much emphasis in going to the feast. They should have realized that they're just going because they need to, but really their protection comes from God and not from the government. They needed to go. They had to go because we need to do things naturally, but they shouldn't have enjoyed it. They shouldn't have put too much emphasis on it. They shouldn't have put too much importance to going to the feast. And that was the problem. So therefore, the fact that they were going to be all killed as a result of that wasn't a punishment. It was a direct consequence. Because the Jews took themselves out of the supernatural protection that God provides for the Jewish people and put themselves under the natural protection of the government of the time, therefore a direct consequence of that is that they will be annihilated. Because naturally the Jewish people don't survive. The Jewish people only survive supernaturally. And therefore, the second they took themselves out of the supernatural protection and put themselves under the natural protection, the direct result of that was a threat to their very existence. How were the Jews saved? The Jews were saved by changing their perspective. When Esther Amalka, Queen Esther, was going to go to the king and beseech him on behalf of the Jewish people, it says that Esther told the Jewish people to fast 3 days before. And she says, Gamani v'naroisai, even me and my maidservants will also fast. Now we know, why was Esther chosen to be queen? Because she was the most beautiful. Naturally, when someone fasts for 3 days, they look tired, they look overwhelmed and tired, and just doesn't increase a good physical presence when someone fasts for 1 day, let alone 3 days. Why would Esther, who's going to the king, using out her connection to the king, do that and make herself not look good? If anything, she should eat, she should look healthy, she should look well. Then Achashverosh will listen to her. But the reason why she went after 3 days of fasting was to show that although she needs to go because we need to do things naturally, but that's exactly it. She's only going because we need to do it, not because our protection is actually coming from that. She fasted and prayed to God to show that although technically she's going to her husband, the king, to use all natural means that we have to save the Jewish people, but our protection and our salvation is coming from God and God alone. And therefore she did that. And that is how the salvation came to the Jewish people. When we shifted our perspective, when we took ourselves out of the natural protection and put ourselves back under God's supernatural protection, that is when the Jewish people were saved. This is about the Jewish people's survival as a whole. And the same thing is about every single person individually throughout their life. Of course, we need to go to work. Of course, we need to do what we can to naturally provide for our families and for ourselves. And in general, during our life, we need to do natural things in order to be healthy, in order to provide for our families. However, we need to know that all of this is only a vessel. The verse tells us, God will bless you in all that you do, which means we need to do what we can do, but we need to realize that all of this is a vessel for God's blessings. It's God's blessings that's providing for us, not the work. We need to work because God says that His blessings will only rest in a vessel, and the vessel is when we work and we do things naturally. But we need to realize that it's only a garment for it's only a place for God's blessings to rest on. And therefore, putting too much emphasis on that is like sewing yourself a very nice big wallet, but having no cash to put inside. Putting too much emphasis on what we do and less emphasis on what God provides is like just making a very big vessel, but without anything coming into it. So, to summarize, of course, we need to do what we can do. Of course, we need to do everything naturally possible to provide for ourselves, to keep ourselves healthy, etc., etc. But we need to remember that our real protection, our real salvation, who's really providing for us is God. All of these things that we do are only a vessel upon which God's blessings can rest. Have a good day.